Hello there, you amazing viewers and subscribers. Welcome to a brand new Doctor Who video today. So, before I get into it, as you can tell, I've now put a little display of Star Trek at the side here of the Doctor Who's because I'm expanding my channel. So, I talk about my two favourite franchises, Doctor Who and, of course, Star Trek. So, talking to somebody a couple of days, around about yesterday, I offered them some good jumping on points to classic Doctor Who, and I thought I'd do a whole video about it and why I recommend them and stuff. So in this video, I'm going to why I recommend these stories of classic Doctor Who. So really, it's going to be called what I recommend to jumping on to classic Doctor Who. So jumping into this, and I've got the DVDs to help me. Now, I do recommend this video. These are the episodes I do highly recommend, and the DVDs, because I think there are good jumping on points and stuff. If you're not into the Blu-rays, I would say get the DVDs first, and then if you want to get the Blu-rays later on, or try and get the Blu-rays now they're coming out in standard release, I do recommend some of these stories because they are out on DVD and of course on Blu-ray. So, jumping on points. So for the first Doctor, I have to say get the Daleks, because this is a great 7-part story. Although it comes in the DVD box set of the beginning, which is only $9.99 in HMV, I absolutely do like the story. It's the introduction story to the Daleks. It's really great with the radiation poison and stuff. I do highly recommend the Daleks. Second story I recommend is the Aztecs. Now I have got two versions of the Aztecs. One to start. Sorry about that. I have the original, the early 2000 version, and the 2013 version. Now, I absolutely do like the Aztecs. I absolutely love the way Barbara is mistaken for this god set in the 15th century Mexico. She's trying to stop the sacrifices, which she does fail because the sacrifices still carry on and happen to try and make it rain. But it's a really great historian episode, and it's a good jumping on point for William Hartnell's Doctor. So coming into the second season now, I have to say, I highly recommend the Dalek Invasion of Earth. Now, this was my first ever William Hartnell story I ever sat down and watched. I absolutely love it. It's got some great stuff in it with the Dalek coming out of the Thames. The Robomen are absolutely quite good. I like the bit with the Doctor saying goodbye to Susan. I do like the line where he goes, "One day I shall come back. Yes, I shall come back. Until then, there must be no regrets, no tears, no anxieties. Just go forward in all your beliefs, and prove to me that I'm not mistaken in mine." That is a great speech, and I do like the Dalek Vision of Earth for that one. Also, for season 2, I highly recommend another good Dalek story, which is The Chase. Now, this one comes in a DVD box set with the Space Museum, which is $9.99 in HMV. Now, this story, I have to say, is really good and fantastic, and great jumping on point for William Hartnell. In this one, the Daleks have their own time machine. They're travelling after the TARDIS team, which is the Doctor, Ian and Barbara, and Vicky. And, of course, this is Ian and Barbara's last story. So, if you want to jump into all of Doctor Who, watch season 1 and then season 2. Ian and Barbara's in it from the very first episode, The Honor of a Child, and this is the last departure story. And it's absolutely amazing. I absolutely do like this story. It's a great Dalek story and a good jumping on point. So, carrying on with William Hartnell now, it is the War Machines. Now, this one I absolutely do love. I don't like the companion Dodo. I think she's really terrible. And it's not the actress, it's the way she's been written. I even got some of the audio stuff here, which I put into DVD casings and got some covers off, like she's companions of in these stories, and she is absolutely terrible, Dodo. I don't really like Dodo, but it's my own opinion. But I absolutely do like the War Machines. I like the way with the Doctor, when you show this is the first time you see the Doctor won't be intimidated, and the way he stands up to the War Machines is incredible. Now, for William Hartnell's last story, I have to say it is the 10th Planet, because I do highly recommend this. It's an introduction story to the Cybermen. It's the introduction story of the Doctor's regeneration. You see him collapsing his TARDIS and regenerates for the very first time. It's an absolutely great story, and I like William Hartnell's kind of few last lines where he goes, "This old body of mine's wearing a bit thin." It is wearing a bit thin. Now, jumping into the second Doctor. Now, the second Doctor's got so many great stories, and I'm trying to keep this really short. So I'm going to say what stories I think should be a great jumping on point. So jumping on to his very first story, I have to say, is the power of the Daleks. So as you can tell, I've got the 2016 version and then the 2020 version. Power of the Daleks is a great jumping on point. Even though it's animated, it's still a good story because it introduces Troughton's Doctor. It's absolutely incredible. And the way you see him destroy the Daleks at the end of part 6 is incredible. Now, the next story I recommend is from season 4, which is as you see, the Macro Terra. I absolutely do like the Macro Terra. I think it's a great story. It's a great 4-part story. I like the way the Macro are these like giant crabs. They are absolutely intelligent. They can scare the human colony. It's just a great story for me, to be honest to say. Now, season 5, I have to say, the very first story would recommend for this season is the Tomb of the Cybermen. I love Tomb of the Cybermen. You see the early 2000s and then the late 2000s. I love Tomb of the Cybermen. It's a great story set on Terros. Your introduction to the Cybermats, the introduction story to the cyber controller. Absolutely amazing and epic. So, coming in, still sticking with the Troughton story, I have to say, the next story I do highly recommend is The Enemy of the World, which I've got here in the 2 DVD versions, Special Edition and the normal version. Now, I absolutely like this. This is the first time I think you see a Doctor, aka Patrick Troughton, plays two roles. He plays the Doctor and Salamander, and Salamander is an evil idiot. And then when he tries to like pretend to be the Doctor, and the Doctor's just there behind him, and he literally Salamander presses the take off button, and he gets flinged into the time vortex. Now, this is a great 6-part story. It's for like a bit like Doctor Who does a bit of James Bond in it. It is incredible and absolutely love it. Next story I do recommend is The Enemy of the World. Now, I do recommend to get the new one, which is the special edition, so you can actually watch the story with episode 3 existing now because of the animation. But as you see, I've got the 2 versions still. I do kind of like this story. I absolutely think the world of it. I like the way with the Yeti. I do like the robot Yeti, and I'm hoping, my God, when the Abominable Snowman gets animated and released onto DVD and Blu-ray, I'm absolutely going to sit down and have a whole Yeti marathon with these 2 stories, with the Abominable Snowman and the Web of Fear. I absolutely do like the Web of Fear. It's the introduction story to Nicholas Courtney, aka Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart. Even though he comes into it in episode 3, it's a good jumping on point, really, for the Troughton's Doctor. It shows the Doctor can be very, very cunning, and he can try and manipulate people. He tries to manipulate the Great Intelligence, but it's a great story and a good actual jumping on point. Now, sticking with Troughton, there's 2 more stories I do highly recommend for his run. If I just move these Sonics because of this side. Now, the next one I do highly recommend is this one, if I can get it out. Yes, I can. Is The Invasion. The Invasion is a good Solomon story. Now, I actually have highly recommended this story. It's Unit's first story. The second, it sets up the John Pertwee era really, really well. And my favourite scene of this is where you see the Solomon literally stepping out the cathedral and coming down and popping out the sewers, and when you see them like walking around the streets, corners and stuff, it's absolutely incredible, and I do love it. Now, also sticking with Troughton, I have to say there is this one. I would recommend the Seas of Death for the Ice Warriors, but that's another topic for Joe. Now, I recommend the War Games, because the War Games is a good introduction story to the Time Lords, really, especially at the end of part 10, where they put the Doctor on trial, they exile him to Earth, and basically make him change his appearance. Again, it's Troughton's last story, not his last appearance in Doctor Who. This is his last main story as the 2nd Doctor, and it is absolutely incredible and amazing. So jumping into Mr. John Pertwee's run now, aka the 3rd Doctor. Now, I have to say, his very first story, which is Spearhead from Space, leads in from the War Games pretty well. I absolutely do like it. So you see, I've got the special edition here, and then the normal version from the early 2000s. I absolutely do like this story. I have got this on VHS and on Blu-ray Steelbook. Now, I have to say this one is a good jumping on point for... This is the first time we see Doctor Who go into colour. The very first appearance of the Autons and the Nesting Consciousness. It's absolutely amazing, and it does set up John Pertwee's Doctor and his era really, really well. So, coming into the next story I do recommend, it is Terror of the Autons. Now, this story is highly recommendable, as it is the first introduction story to the Doctor's arch-enemy known as the Master, who is a fellow Time Lord. So the Master does take control of the next in consciousness, and he builds his own army of Autons, which is another good point of this story. And it's also Katie Managan's very first appearance as Jo Grant, and she is one of my favourite companions in my top 10. Next, I have to say, is the Claws of Axos, which is right here. As you see, I've got the normal. Now, you may probably scratching your head saying, why would I recommend the Claws of Axos? Now, the Claws of Axos, believe it or not, this was my very first ever Jon Pertwee story I actually ever watched. And ever since then, I was about 5, 6, and it just glued into my mind. I love the whole Axons. I like the Master working with the Axons. Like, then he tries to work with the Doctor, and then he gets his TARDIS back and he runs away at the end of it. I like the way how the Doctor creates a quantum time loop and traps Axos into it. Axos, I absolutely do like, especially the way it can shapeshift into different forms, because Axos is not a living thing. It's basically a living thing, but it's a whole entity. I have to say that one. So, sticking with Jon Pertwee, I have to say the Sea Devils is another good jumping on point. I absolutely do like this story. I like the way the Master is in prison because of the events of the demons, something like that. I absolutely do like the Sea Devils. I like the way they come out of the water as well. They go, "This is our planet." That's my impression of a Sea Devil. It most probably bad. But I absolutely do like the Sea Devils will rise. I absolutely do like the Sea Devils. I think I would actually like them to return into Modern Who. Now, these are cousins to the Silurians. Now, the cousins to the Silurians have returned, so fingers crossed. So, also jumping into the Pertwee era, I highly recommend is The Three Doctors. Now, this one is the first ever multi-doc story. This sees Patrick Troughton return as the second Doctor to help his later on incarnation, who's been exiled because of, you know. And even though William Hartnell is incredibly ill at this point, he does do like a little cameo appearance through the TV screen of the TARDIS. And he tells the Doctors what to do. I absolutely do like this story. It's a great way. Omega is a great villain. I like the little antimatter blob creatures. It's a really great jumping on point for Jon Pertwee, I have to say. Sticking with Jon Pertwee, there are 2 more stories. Now, this one is called The Green Death. So, as you can tell, I've got the original and the special edition. Now, I absolutely do like The Green Death because it is Katie Managan's last story as Jo Grant. I like the fact that it's basically a global chemical storyline that we basically throw a load of chemicals down into an old mine where we have flies nesting eggs, and it basically makes the flies' eggs go incredibly large, and then when they hatch, you get big giant maggots, and then when you get into later on of the story, you have this big giant massive fly. Again, I absolutely do like the story. The special effects do let it down a bit, especially in the Blu-ray, but I absolutely love it for what it is. I like the whole boss. I like Stevens. I like the way the Doctor has to cunningly do a bit of James Bond. Instead of like being the way he is, he has to go in under the sky like a milkman and then a cleaning lady. It's just a great story. Then, of course, for Jon Pertwee, I have to recommend his last story from season 11. This is the one story of season 11 I absolutely do love, and it is Planet of the Spiders. Set on Metabelius 3, you have the spiders that want the Metabelius crystal that the Doctor took off them, and it leads into his regeneration. So when he goes and returns the crystal to the big giant spider, aka All Hail the Great One, he gets radiation poisoning, and after he gets radiation poisoning, he basically goes into his he actually ends up regenerating after the radiation destroys his body. A Time Lord friend of his, Chanvo, gets his hands, pushes the cells to make him regenerate into his next incarnation. So jumping into the Tom Baker era now. Now, there are so many stories I could highly recommend for Tom Baker. I love Tom Baker as the Doctor. He's my all-time favourite Doctor. So I do recommend Robot. I think it's a good jumping on point after the Planet of the Spiders, and it shows Tom Baker is very, very quirky and eccentric from the beginning. Now, Ark in Space, I do recommend. Now, I've got 2 versions. I've got the special edition and a normal version. I like the Wirren. I like the green bubble wrap they use to make the Wirren like like the maggot, like a big giant green maggot covered in bubble wrap, and when you see it like kind of crawling and popping. I absolutely do like this story. Tom Baker is phenomenal as the Fourth Doctor in this. It's his second outing as the Fourth Doctor, and it is amazing. Now, Genesis of the Daleks is next. I do recommend this story because it's not only just a Dalek story, it introduces the Daleks creator, aka Davros. Now, again, the Daleks do exterminate Davros at the end of it, but he somehow survives because he does come back later in a Tom Baker run. But this story I absolutely love because it doesn't just set up the Daleks really well. You see the bit of the Carlins and the Fowls battle that they've been going on for centuries. Next on the list, I recommend Revenge of the Summer. Now, this is the only summer story from the 1970s. Yeah, not many people like this one, but I personally do love it. It's a great story. I like the way it leads in from the kind of story arc from season 12, after that arc, Santana Experiment and Genesis of the Daleks. I like Revenge. So, jumping into season 13 now, I have to say I do recommend the Pyramids of Mars. Now, this one is a good story. I like Sutek. I like the robot mummies. I like the fact when because actually robots and they can actually suffocate you by pressing against you and you squeeze your air out and stuff like that. I absolutely do like the story. I like Sutek when the Doctor gets under control from Sutek with his mind. He goes, "You draw by Sutek, who is supreme," and then the Doctor goes, "Sutek is supreme." I absolutely do like the story. Also, for season 13, I have to say I highly recommend The Brain of Morbius. It's a good Frankenstein twist of Doctor Who. I normally watch this around about Halloween time because it is absolutely horrifying. It's very, very gothic. It's amazing. I love the bit with Morbius where they have the Solomon putting Morbius' brain in the jar, and when it connects him up to his body, he literally comes up like that, and then it's like goes insane. I do like that story as well. Now, season 14, I highly recommend The Hand of Fear because it's a great story. It is Elizabeth Sladen's last appearance in classic Doctor Who. It is Sarah Jane's last story in classic Doctor Who before she comes back into the Five Doctors and, of course, modern Who. Again, it's a very great jumping on point. I like Aldred. I think he's an interesting villain. Sticking with season 14, I have to say this one. It is the Robots of Death. Robots of Death, I consider it to be a great story. It's the Fourth Doctor and Leela. I like the way you have this robot operation and the way the Doctor defeats him by having Leela hide in a cupboard with the air tank, and it makes his voice go all squeaky human and the androids go and kill him. I highly recommend also from season 14, which is The Talents of Wing Chiang. Now, this one is a great story and it ends the Finch Hinchcliffe era really, really well. It's set in the Victorian times. You have Chinese people going around killing people. You have Magnus Grill draining the lives of the women in that time period so he can survive. Because he's basically a time criminal from the 15th century. And he's on the run from the Time Agency, which we are reintroduced in Doctor Who with Captain Jack Harkness. Again, this one's a really, really great story. So, carrying on with this for Tom Baker's run, I recommend Horror of Fenrock because I really do like that one. It's the only appearance of the Santorum enemies, the Rutons, which is a great story. The Invasion of Time, I do highly recommend that one as well. It's absolutely great. Season 17, now, I don't recommend any of season 16 to jump on point. Even though I think it's good, it's not really a great way to introduce somebody to jump onto because it's a whole season, you can't buy the DVDs separately. Now, for season 17, I have to say City of Death because that one is just an absolutely classic and it's the first time Doctor Who isn't actually filmed in the UK. They actually get the permission and they go to film in France for that. Also, I would highly recommend Sharda because Sharda is a good story. Even though it wasn't finished and broadcast, it was finished with animation in 2017 and the animation is absolutely epic. Season 18, I have to say, I would highly recommend Maglos because I do like Maglos with the shapeshifting captures and the way he kidnaps a human, uses the body and shapeshifts the Doctor. Also, I do recommend The Keeper of Traken because, again, that one's a very good murder mystery story, especially when you know the Melka, but you don't know who's controlling the Melka until the final part when it turns out to be the Master. Using the Traken's power of the Source, he jumps into Tremus's body, and Tremus becomes the Master, played by Anthony Ainley. And then we go into his last story, which is Logopolis, which I do recommend because that one is Tom Baker's last story. Now, I do recommend all of the Doctor's first and last stories, apart from The Unearthly Child. But I absolutely do like that. Now, you do get this in the box set called New Beginnings with Keeper of Traken. And, of course, the introduction story to the 5th Doctor, which is the Caves of Andros. And Castrovalva, sorry. I don't know why I was going to say Caves of Androsani now. That's still in my mind, and I don't know why. So, anyway, the 5th Doctor. Jumping into Caves of Androsani, which I have just said you can get in the New Beginnings box set. I do highly recommend this one because it does recommend the Doctor struggling with regeneration and amnesia for the first time. It's a great jumping on point to Peter Davison's run. The way he literally gets his companions after the 4th Doctor with Adric, Nyssa and Tegan, it's really, really great. And the way he does get his stuff back later on in the episode and he remembers Adric, it's really, really great. Still coming with Peter Davison, I recommend The Visitation because that one is just a great classic. I absolutely do love that story. I think it's one of the first ones in the 1980s that do a historian episode. And it has the Doctor fighting against the Tellarites, which basically is into causing the Great Fire of London. Also, I do recommend Earthshock because that's the Return of the Sandman in 1982. And it's just a great story. And it's the first time we see a Doctor's companion die. And it's the first time we actually see a Doctor's companion die. Next, I recommend The 5 Doctors because The 5 Doctors is incredible. I absolutely do love it. And then for season 21, I recommend Resurrection of the Daleks because that is a good Dalek story. And of course, The Caves of Androsani. I absolutely do like those stories. That are absolutely amazing and epic. And it shows the 5th Doctor going into a really, really sort of like a dark persona in dark stories. It's really great. Colin Baker now, aka the 6th Doctor. I recommend The Attack of the Cybermen because that's the first time we see the Cybermen crush somebody's hands and all the blood comes splurting out. Vengeance on Veros, I love the torture scenes in it. I love Syl. I think he's a great villain. Syl's absolutely amazing. And then also I recommend The 2 Doctors. The 2 Doctors is phenomenal. I do like it. Not many people do. It's the last appearance of the Santarans and it's the last appearance of Patrick Troughton as the 2nd Doctor. So if you want to do a whole 2nd Doctor marathon, I would highly recommend his stories I've recommended, as well as the 3 Doctors, 5 Doctors, and the 2 Doctors. And then for the last story for Colin Baker, I recommend Revolution of the Daleks. Now, this one is a great Dalek story. You have Davros pretending to be the great healer. It has a lot of potential for it, and it's really, really great. So, jumping into Sylvester McCoy's run now as the 7th Doctor. Now, this is the last lot of the list I do highly recommend. So I recommend Paradise Towers because I do like that because it's the first time you see the 7th Doctor becoming a bit darker, manipulative, and it's absolutely great story. I like the Kangs. I like the way you have like the red Kangs and the blue Gangs, the Kangs, then the yellow Kangs are dead. You got the Razzies, which is the old people, and they get killed by the cleaners. And the way you see the chief get possessed by the actual artifact, it's just a great way. Next list I do recommend, I have to say, is Dragonfire. I do like Dragonfire. It's an introduction story to Ace. It's Bonnie Langford's last story as well. Now, Bonnie Langford was actually introduced in season 23, but that's another video for another day. I do like the story because it revisits a bit Funk Savalon Glitz. The 7th Doctor is phenomenal in the story. I do like the story. Season 25, Remembrance of the Daleks. I do like Remembrance of the Daleks. It's a great Dalek story. You've got a Dalek Civil War. They're fighting over an old Gallifreyan weapon that the 1st Doctor left on Earth. It's just an absolutely great. And even though when the 7th Doctor manipulates Davros into using it into detonating Scaro's Sun into a supernova, fantastic. And also for season 25, I have to say, The Happiness Patrol. I do like The Happiness Patrol. I think it's very dark, gruesome. I like the Candyman. The way he is like a cyborg and then he kills sweets that make sweets that kill people. It's a really great dark story. Same with Silver Nemesis. I like Silver Nemesis just because it's the last appearance of the Summon in classic Doctor Who. And it is not a great story, but it's still a good way to watch it. Battlefield, season 26. I do like Battlefield. I'd say it's Nicholas Courtney's last appearance as Brigadier Alistair left for Stuart before he comes into the Sarah Jane Adventures. I'd say I think it's a good story, really. I like Alison. I like the whole bit with Merlin and Morgaine. And Seventh Doctor does manipulate the events here as well, which is really good. Curse of Fenric, I highly recommend this story because, again, this is where you see more of the Chessmaster version of the Seventh Doctor. When he manipulates Fenric, he manipulates the Heberforce, and he even stitches up his own companion, Ace, into hating him. It's just a really great dark story, like especially when you see these two women go jump into the sea, and then these hands come out and grab them, and they vanish, and next minute you know they come out, like they pop out of the sea, and then they go, yes, come into the water, join us. And then when you see this stupid Russian soldier taking his helmet off, being hypnotized, going in, and you just see the Heberforce hands just come and drag him under the water. Great scenes. And then, of course, Survival. Now, Survival is the last ever story of classic Doctor Who, and I do highly recommend it. I like the return of Anthony Ainley as the Master. He's absolutely great in this. The cheat people, their costumes are pretty weak, but it does set up a lot for modern Who. So this is my stories I highly recommend jumping onto classic Doctor Who. Let me know in the comments what you think of my recommendations. Do you agree with me on some of these, or do you not agree with me? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Please do like, subscribe, and share. And there will be another video coming out today, because from now on, I'm going to be doing 2 videos a day. One about Doctor Who, and one about Star Trek, but that will be later on today. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.